I thought our marriage was solid, built on love, honesty, and years of shared memories. But the man I trusted with my heart was living a lie behind my back. This story is about betrayal, shattered trust, and finding the strength to rebuild from the ruins. Part 1. I always believed love was enough. Enough to weather storms, to bridge silences, and to forgive mistakes. But love, at least the kind I thought I had, wasn't enough. Not when the person you trust most is quietly building a world without you in it. Our story began like many others, filled with laughter and small moments that felt monumental. James and I met in college, two restless souls thrown together by chance but held together by an undeniable connection. We were inseparable, partners in crime and in dreams. The first few years were blissful, a whirlwind of late-night talks, road trips, and shared ambitions. When we married, I was certain we were invincible. For years, James was my rock. He was steady and kind, the kind of man who showed love, not just in words, but in actions. I believed we had a future mapped out clearly. Kids, a home filled with memories, growing old side by side. But beneath the calm surface, cracks were forming. They were subtle at first. Missed calls, late nights at work, a text message quickly hidden when I walked into the room. I told myself it was just stress, nothing more. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then the truth hit me like a freight train. One evening I came home earlier than usual from work. The house was too quiet, too empty. When I walked into our bedroom, there she was. Not a stranger, but a woman I had met only a handful of times at social gatherings. She was laughing with James, their hands brushing in a way that erased me from the room. I froze, the world tilting around me. The betrayal wasn't just in the act. It was in the fact that it was happening under my roof, behind my back. What followed was a painful unraveling. James confessed, not out of remorse, but because he could no longer keep the truth hidden. Our conversations became battles, filled with anger, tears, and desperate questions. How long had this been going on? Why me? Was any of it real? Every answer cut deeper than the last. The nights I spent crying alone felt endless. I questioned everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and myself. But in the darkness, a small flame of strength began to burn. I realized this story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival, reclaiming my dignity, and learning to trust myself again. I won't lie, the path ahead was anything but easy. But through the heartbreak, I found a fierce resolve to rebuild my life on my own terms. And that journey started with one choice: to no longer be defined by his betrayal. Part 2. The days after that night were a haze, an endless loop of disbelief, heartbreak, and confusion. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. The way James smiled at her, the way they moved like they belonged to each other. It was like a cruel dream I couldn't wake up from. How had I missed the signs? How could someone I loved so deeply hide such a dark secret? For a while, I was lost in the pain. I withdrew from friends and family, unable to face their pitying eyes or the inevitable questions. I wanted to scream, but the sound got caught in my throat. The silence in our home was suffocating, once filled with laughter and warmth that now echoed with betrayal. James tried to explain. His words were empty apologies and excuses, promises to change that felt hollow. But the truth was, I no longer trusted him. Trust was the foundation our marriage was built on, and now it lay shattered at my feet. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Our bedroom, once a sanctuary, was now a battleground of cold glances and unspoken resentments. Every time I looked at him, I saw not the man I married, but a stranger who had torn my heart apart. I found myself questioning everything: my worth, my choices, the life I had built. Was I naive, blind? Did I not deserve better? Nights were the worst. Alone in the dark, memories of our happiest times clashed painfully with the harsh reality of his betrayal. But amid the darkness, a spark of clarity emerged. I realized that I couldn't let this betrayal define me. I had to find a way to reclaim my life, my self-respect, and my peace. It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about survival and growth. Slowly, I began to reach out, first to a therapist, then to friends I had pushed away. I poured my pain into words, unburdening myself and letting go of the shame. Each conversation was a small step toward healing. I also started rediscovering myself, hobbies I had abandoned, passions I'd forgotten. It was as if I was waking up from a long, painful sleep. The woman James betrayed wasn't gone. She was still there, buried beneath the pain, ready to fight back. One day I stood in front of the mirror and saw not just the woman who had been betrayed, but the woman who was choosing to rise. It was terrifying and empowering all at once. James wanted to fix what he'd broken, but I knew some wounds run too deep. Whether we stayed together or not, I had to find my own path forward, and that journey was just beginning. Part 3. Moving forward wasn't a straight line. It was a winding road full of doubts, setbacks, and small victories. Every day, I faced moments where the past tried to pull me back in. A familiar scent, a song we once loved, or the way the house creaked at night, reminding me of all we lost. But I was learning to stand firm, to anchor myself in the present. I began setting boundaries, not just with James but with myself. No more hiding my feelings, no more pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. I demanded honesty, even when it was painful. I started attending support groups where I met others who understood the silent agony of betrayal, people who had been broken and were rebuilding their lives piece by piece. The hardest part was learning to forgive, not for him, but for me. Forgiving myself for trusting too much, for believing in something that turned out to be a lie. Forgiving myself for the nights I cried alone, for the moments I doubted my worth. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It meant releasing the heavy weight of anger that kept me chained. Slowly, the fog began to lift. I rediscovered joy in small things. A walk in the park, a new book, a phone call with a friend. I started dreaming again, not about us, but about me. I envisioned a future where I was whole, independent, and strong, whether that included James or not. He wanted me to stay. He promised to change, to rebuild our marriage. But by then, I knew that some breaks can't be mended by words alone. Trust once shattered is a delicate thing, and sometimes the bravest choice is to walk away. That realization was both terrifying and freeing. I had to choose between holding on to a broken past or stepping into an uncertain future. I chose the future. For myself, for my dignity, for my peace. This journey wasn't easy, and it still isn't. But every step I take reminds me that betrayal, while it can break you, doesn't have to define you. You can rise from the ruins, stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever before. Part 4. Starting over was like learning to breathe underwater, awkward, frightening, and utterly foreign. I moved out of the house we shared, taking only what I could carry in a small suitcase. The empty rooms echoed with memories, but I knew I needed space to heal, to reclaim my sense of self. The first nights alone were the hardest. Silence settled in like a heavy fog, pressing against my chest. But gradually, I filled that silence with new routines. Morning coffee on the balcony, journaling my thoughts, and long walks through the city streets. Each day, I built a little more of the life that was mine alone. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with, people who reminded me who I was before the pain. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. Therapy helped me unpack the tangled emotions, anger, grief, shame, and taught me how to stand tall in the face of heartbreak. Dating felt impossible at first. How could I trust anyone again? But with time, I realized that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's choices. I was enough on my own. James tried reaching out, but I was firm. The man I married was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. Forgiveness was a gift I gave myself, not him. I chose to close that chapter and focus on the one still unwritten. This story isn't about a perfect ending. It's about survival. The quiet courage it takes to walk away from what breaks you and the fierce hope that blooms from pain. Betrayal might have shattered my world, but it also revealed my strength, and that strength is mine forever. Part 5. The months that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days I felt invincible, like I could conquer the world and leave the past behind. Other days, the weight of betrayal pressed down on me so hard that getting out of bed seemed impossible. Healing wasn't linear. It was messy, confusing, and sometimes painfully slow. I found solace in small victories. Cooking a meal just for myself, laughing at a silly movie alone, or waking up without the shadow of despair clouding my mind. Each step forward was a testament to my resilience, a quiet rebellion against the pain that tried to consume me. But healing also meant confronting the darkest parts of my story. I had to face the memories I wished I could erase. The whispered phone calls, the stolen glances, the nights he wasn't home. It hurt to remember, but it was necessary to truly let go. I realized the betrayal wasn't about me. It was about his choices, his failures, his flaws. I was not broken. Our marriage was. I was a survivor, not a victim. Slowly, I began to dream again, not of a life with him, but of a future where I was whole and happy on my own terms. I started setting goals for myself, a new job, a trip I always wanted to take, new friendships to nurture, and then, unexpectedly, love found me again. Not with fireworks or grand declarations, but quietly and steadily. A gentle hand reaching out, a kind heart that didn't judge my scars. This new love wasn't a replacement. It was a reminder that I was worthy of happiness. This part of my story is about the painful yet beautiful process of rebuilding, brick by brick, day by day. Betrayal tried to define me, but I refused to let it have the final word. Part 6. As the dust settled on the wreckage of my marriage, I learned that forgiveness is not a gift you give to someone else. It's a gift you give yourself. Forgiving him didn't mean forgetting or excusing what he did. It meant freeing myself from the constant grip of anger and bitterness, allowing my heart to breathe again. Forgiveness came slowly, like the first light of dawn creeping over a dark horizon. I started with small acts, forgiving myself for not seeing the signs sooner, forgiving the years I had spent convincing myself everything was fine, forgiving the part of me that blamed my own worth. Then I faced the hardest forgiveness of all, forgiving him, not for his sake, but to reclaim my peace. It wasn't easy. Some nights the hurt would resurface like a tidal wave, pulling me back into despair. But with every wave, I grew stronger. I learned to ride the pain instead of drowning in it. In this process, I discovered a strength I never knew I had, a strength that came from standing tall despite heartbreak, from choosing hope over despair, from embracing my own value beyond the betrayal I endured. I also realized that healing is not a destination, but a journey. Some days would be better than others. Some wounds would always leave a scar, but scars tell stories, stories of survival, resilience, and courage. I began to rebuild my life with intention. I set boundaries with people who didn't honor my growth. I nurtured friendships that uplifted me. I dedicated time to passions I'd neglected, painting, writing, long hikes in nature that cleared my mind. Most importantly, I learned to love myself again. Not because someone else loved me, but because I chose to love the person I am, flaws, scars, and all. The pain of betrayal marked the end of one chapter, but it also opened the door to a new beginning. A beginning where I was the author of my own story, writing pages filled with hope, strength, and newfound joy. Part 7. With time, I began to see the world and myself through a new lens. The betrayal that once consumed my every thought slowly became a chapter in a much larger story. It was a painful chapter, yes, but one that revealed my capacity for endurance and growth. I started dating again, cautiously at first. Trust was a fragile thing, shattered into pieces that I wasn't sure could ever be pieced back together. But with each new conversation, each new smile, I learned that vulnerability is not weakness, it's bravery. I met people who showed me kindness without expectation, who listened without judgment, who respected my boundaries and my past. These new connections helped me rebuild my faith in love. Not perfect or fairy tale love, but real, honest, and human love. At the same time, I invested in my career and personal dreams. I went back to school, pursued projects that ignited my passion, and surrounded myself with mentors who believed in me. My self-worth no longer depended on anyone else's approval. It blossomed from within. Still, there were moments when the past whispered back. A familiar scent, a song on the radio, the echo of his voice in my mind. Those moments tested my resolve, but I faced them head-on, reminding myself how far I'd come. I also realized something vital. Healing is not linear. Some days felt like leaps forward, others like steps back, but every step was progress. Most importantly, I found forgiveness not just for him, but for myself, for the mistakes, the naivete, and the moments I doubted my own worth. This journey reshaped me. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that storm. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future on my own terms. Part 8. As the years passed, the scars of betrayal softened into lessons rather than wounds. I found peace not because the pain vanished, but because I learned to carry it differently, as a reminder of my resilience and my capacity to rebuild. I discovered that true strength isn't in holding on to anger or bitterness, but in choosing hope and growth. Every morning, I woke up with a renewed commitment to myself, to my happiness, and to the life I deserved. I also learned to trust again, not blindly but wisely, to listen to my intuition and set boundaries that honored my worth. Love returned to my life, but this time it was different. Honest, respectful, and grounded in mutual care. Reclaiming my story meant telling it my way, owning my pain, and celebrating my victories, big and small. I began sharing my journey openly, hoping that others who suffered in silence might find strength in my words. The betrayal that once defined me became a catalyst for transformation. It taught me that even when everything falls apart, we have the power to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more whole than before. Looking back, I don't regret the pain or the struggle, because without it, I wouldn't have found the woman I am today. This story is for anyone who feels broken and lost. Know that healing is possible, and a new beginning is always within reach.